And J.D. Vance nervously shifted, started to change the topic and said, well, Tim, we've got to look to the future. And that was a clear win for Walz, and probably the soundbite of the night for those that didn't watch.
Back to the USA, where last night on TV, on network TV, the running mates in the presidential race went head-to-head on stage. I mean, after such a bitter contest, which is still pretty bitter, it was, at times, surprisingly cordial.
And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on.
Well, J.D. Vance was rather sympathetic when Tim Walz spoke about his son being witness to a shooting.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy.
Well, let's talk to Sarah Baxter, who was watching the whole thing with a very critical eye, director of the Marie Colvin Sarah for International Reporting. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, John.
So not the dust-up that we might have been expecting. Were you surprised by that?
I was. I thought the whole point of being a vice presidential running mate was to be an attack dog for your boss. And they fell into this rather cozy, I agree with Tim, I agree with JD routine, as if it was sort of the bipartisan era that has long faded from the scene. Well, basically, ever since Donald Trump arrived as a major force in US politics. This was a big wasted opportunity for Tim Walz, I have to say.
Yeah, I suppose we should say there's nothing, wrong per se in a bit of cordiality in politics. But this presidential race is so characterized by below the belt infighting, bitter blows being traded, and the Democrat argument that Donald Trump and his running mate are just out of control. Stirrers of trouble. It hardly made sense to take this sort of tone.
Exactly. It meant that J.D. Vance was normalized. I mean, it was Walz who brilliantly portrayed Trump and Vance as weird. And now it was like, oh no, J.D. Vance is a good bloke. Maybe his boss isn't so hot. But this was not the message that the Harris campaign surely wanted to hear. And I do think that a lot of people thought Tim Walz looked very nervous. And my verdict is he flubbed it. By normalizing Vance, he made the Trump-Vance ticket much less of an existential threat, which is a point that Democrats really want to hammer home and didn't.
Do you pick up, Sarah, any acknowledgement of what you're saying from within no doubt off the record, but is there any acknowledgement of what you're saying, that they missed the trick here, they made it a little bit harder to pick up the cudgel afterwards?
If it was just about being cordial to each other, that would be one thing. But the other thing is that Tim Walz, who, plays a good kind of country hick role, but actually has been around politics for a very long time, looked extremely nervous and out of his depth during the debate. While J.D. Vance, supposedly the rookie from a hillbilly background, but albeit a trained Yale Law School lawyer, looked smooth, cool, and collected, and not that weird. Now, I have to give Tim Walz credit for one thing. He absolutely nailed J.D. Vance at the end of the debate on whether or not Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. And J.D. Vance nervously shifted, started to change the topic and said, well, Tim, we've got to look to the future. And that was a clear win for Walz, and probably the soundbite of the night for those that didn't watch. But overall, I thought that Walz looked kind of lightweight, and this was very, very bad for the Harris Walz ticket.
Yeah, well, one imagines if there was another debate, then Walz might go at it differently. But there will not be another debate. And given that, are you maybe reassessing, if it needed reappraising, your view of Tim Walz as a running mate? Running mates don't tend to decide American presidential elections, do they? But does he maybe look not quite the pick that he did before?
Yes, some of the shine has come off him, because what everybody loved on the Democratic side about Tim Walz was that he took the fight to the Trumpists in a way that really got under their skin. And that's very hard to do because, the whole point about being Donald Trump is to be shameless about what you say. And he did get under their skin and rattle them and go viral with his depictions of them as weird and wanting to be in your bedroom and in your life, in your doctor's examination room, all these great sound bites that he came up with. But he didn't really land them. And that was unfortunate. But yeah, do these debates matter? Well, insiders are saying, particularly within the Democratic Party, they're saying, well, no, they don't really matter and it's not going to move the needle. But that's damage limitation. It probably won't move the needle that much. But with just a month to go, and early voting's already underway in some states, what Kamala Harris needed was another burst of energy like the one that she got when she trounced Donald Trump. So, the only thing that can be said in consolation is, in contrast to Walz, Kamala Harris looked pretty damn good.
Right. What are the polls telling us? I know that this thing, it's almost within the margin of error, no matter where you look, national polls, swing state polls, but how do you read the movement, if there is movement?
There isn't much movement. That's the point now. I think Kamala Harris had huge momentum after Joe Biden dropped out. She still got the upper hand, which is extraordinary given that Trump was in the lead and seemed unassailable after the assassination attempt against him in Butler, Pennsylvania. So she's doing pretty well. But she's about 2.5, 3 points ahead of him in the polling averages and ahead of him by tiny margins in swing states. And among some of the buyer's remorse is a certain amount of regret that she didn't choose the brainy Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, as her running mate, because this whole race could come down to who wins that state.
Right. Okay, well, they've made that choice, whatever happens, for better or worse. Sarah Baxter, thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it.
And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer.